Marianne McKenna is a founding partner of KPMB Architects. And Marianne has been honored as an officer of the Order of Canada for her contributions to creating architecture that enriches the public experience. She was named one of Canada's top 100 most powerful women by the Financial Post. Marianne McKenna, thank you for joining me today on this time together. We've had some discussion prior, and we've been talking about three, I call them bounding questions that help us focus our thought that I had shared with you. The first of those being, as we've gone through this set of crises over this year, of which the public health crisis around COVID-19 was only one of a series of crises that the world has gone through, whether it's that or whether it's the dynamic we've been experiencing with excessive climate change that's happening, the social upheavals that have been occurring, the political silliness and crisis that we've watched in different parts of the world, so many different things. I guess when I look at all that, my question to you is, as an observer, as someone who is keenly aware of what's happening in societies, and particularly you're speaking to us today from, or you're in Canada most of the time, what do you observe as the lessons that were potentially learned during this time, things that we may have become to start adopting into our own lives coming through this set of crises over this last 15 months?
Well, I think it's an exceptional moment. I think you don't have these opportunities in a lifetime that often. I can think of one other time for us in Canada, in Toronto, where that happened. But, we're focusing right now on, less on the executional and more on the conceptual. We are very focused. Our practice is in a kind of transition. It's a kind of broadening of leadership as we go through a kind of a longer term succession planning. And we are very focused on core purpose. And I think and I would say absolutely it is stimulated by COVID, by the Black Lives Matter, and by the issues in Canada, which particularly focused on Indigenous truth and reconciliation, telling the truth about what's happened, which we have not been able to do for these past hundreds of years, or 100 and almost 200 years. And, the issues that we're focusing on are those Indigenous, how to incorporate and blend in Indigenous ways of knowing, how to change our lives and enrich our lives by accepting others. We're in a very interesting time, and a lot of it's driven by millennials as well as these events. A focus on what purpose really means in our practice, in our lives. We're having to take issues that have been slotted to the back of the drawer and actually fully open the drawer to understand, or we will not be successful as a practice, as human beings. And just that this opportunity has come. So, we're very focused on the issues of social equity, how we address those through our projects. We have the opportunity to do we do a lot of residential, but as these issues have emerged, we're being asked by government to include social housing, to low-income housing, affordable housing, and redefining what that kind of residential offering is, as we have so much immigration in Canada. It's the richness of our country, really. It is that, that edict around mutual accommodation. How do we accommodate everybody, not only physically, but socially and kind of with purpose? Where, diversity and inclusion as emerging themes, and how do we address those again through our practice and individually in our lives? So we're in this kind of very much a transition period. So of course we're thinking about the issues and how they apply to our practice. How will the workplace change? How will we ever gather in performance spaces again? How can we turn the performance spaces inside out so that we can work in that way? How do we think about, so much of the work that we do, which includes community? We really are focused on larger groups of people and bringing them together for the richness of being together, for the learning, for the opening up of spirit, for the conversations that allow us to embrace new ideas. And that's, all of the work that I'm particularly interested in, focus on in our practice.
Did you think at this time in the history of KPMB, your firm, that at 35 years, I think it's that you founded this 35 years ago, that could you ever even envision that this is where we would be at this time? Did you have some nirvana moments where you were thinking years ago that we would come to this certain place in our society and in our practice where we would see this convergence occur? Just some thinking.
Well, it's really interesting because, as we've gone through, we're adding 7 new partners to our practice, so we will be 10. And we're, not only that, the broadening of principals, of senior associates, of a community of people that's critical, all of whom, every individual is critical to the practice. But it's also finding, I think this period allows us to sort of shift back to say everybody is valuable, every individual's value, and find their value. So if I go back 35 years, the original founding partners sat together and worked out our core values. And I would say probably at that time it was worked out. We had to acknowledge we had worked together as associates for Barton Myers for up to 7 or 9 years, in my case 7. So we knew each other incredibly well, but we sat down with a consultant and we worked through who we were, what our ambitions were. And, to me, those were our core values. And yet when we were about to make new partners, they said, well, we don't understand you. Having worked with you for 15 or 18 years, please tell us, what you are about. And this was kind of shocking to me. But of course, it was the demographics, it was the younger generations, it was the millennials asking us, that actually come up and allowed you, to energize, enable everyone in the practice. So it's a very different construct. So I have come to realize through this 1-year exercise that we've been through, that was facilitated by COVID, because we could all get together on screen. We could all be there. And, I actually find it reasonably intimate, to be sitting with just you, not imagining there are, 50 other people who might be engaging in this, but it has a kind of intimacy. And so we worked through these issues, and, and they will be, as we announce our new expanded leadership, you will see these issues presented along with them. So it is equity, diversity, and inclusion, the kind of statement that we can make. Sustainability, our approach to the environment, and how we have to be not only committed verbally, but actually make those changes. And then our core values presented to our firm. And I said, gosh, it looks really long. Well, some people will read it and some people will read the headline, but I think it is important for us to spell out to each other and to the practice. So it's not just that commitment to the 3 of us working together, 3 founding partners working together, it's the broad commitment to our practice. So this is all about broadening the leadership, making new leaders, figuring things out. So it's this, and I would say, that's a post-COVID thing, right? That we will take this forward, and it transforms the practice, of course, but it also sort of highlights, what we've been doing for 35 years, which fundamentally it's that, we have 3 questions that my partner Bruce learned in school. How does it work? Does it work well? And third question, how does it look and feel? So, fundamentally at the core of our practice is asking how things work. So you have a new client, how does it work? And then you say, well, does it work well? No, how can we make these adjustments? How can we expand your vision? How can we represent who you are as an entity, as an institution? And then what does it look and feel like?
Yeah.
So this is fundamental, and we all work in that way because it's part of the discipline. And I would say that's why our work looks the way it does and lasts. So we don't, we're not looking at the ephemeral. A lot of people want us to look at the ephemeral, but in fact, my feeling is it has to be a sustainable proposition on all levels.
That you are applying your own medicine to yourself. and how you look at this next generation of leadership is fantastic, honestly. Far too often, the cobbler's children have no shoes, right? We spend everything we have outside and nothing on ourselves, and you are taking meaningful moments to figure this out and bring core values from the background of that is settled into our lives to the overtness of voice. And that is fantastic, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and it takes time to do these things. Everybody says, why is it taking so long to make the announcement? Why is it taking time? Well, that time has allowed us to solidify, the firm itself, all the practice that was announced several months ago. This will be released so that our clients and our collaborators, and sort of really, and acknowledging the kind of breadth of the practice.
Yeah, it's a wonderful focus now on this new generation. And we spend a lot of time talking about the difference between ownership within a firm, leading the firm, and managing the firm. Three very distinct things. And I find more often than not in firms that people who become shareholders or owners presume leadership when they may not have a leadership gene in their body.
Right.
And it can become rather stale. So I know the fact that you folks have spent such meaningful time over this last year in those intimate connections with each other, you've been navigating that. This is a major observation and lesson learned that you're applying into your own firm, and now turning that inside out into how you're going to apply these very core values into your client engagements. When we think about other changes, I've watched this industry for years go through these economic cycles. We hold our breath and wait for everything to go back to normal. And then okay, let's go back to work.
Yeah.
And yet, this is not your typical economic cycle. This has been a world-changing set of events that have occurred. I'm wondering, what are you predicting to be the permanent changes that will occur in industry and maybe even across the Canadian society as a result of what we've passed through? Things we won't recede from and go back to old practices, but things that we will permanently make our new paradigms in how we think and speak and behave.
That's such an interesting question. Everybody's talking about health and wellness. Can we put a wellness room in these offices? Yeah, of course we can. But I think in Canada, we've had this advantage. It may not be presented that way always in the US, but we have a huge advantage from a healthcare perspective that we offer medicine to every single person in the country. And this, I think, during COVID has been extended to mental health as well. Everyone's talking, really thoughtfully about mental health. And in Toronto, we have, in the last decades maybe, we've had something called the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, CAMH. And they very wisely went to leaders in the community, and through people that were making donations to CAMH, they discovered that, of course, when you donate to Sick Kids Hospital or you donate to CAMH, there's no family is untouched by issues of mental health. No family. So we've had the leaders of our society, in business and in institutions, talk about it. Talk about alcoholism, bipolar, eating disorders, and we've actually brought that to the forefront so that it is actually something we talk about across Canada. And I'm incredibly proud. We're just doing. We won a competition to do. We've worked with them for the last 20 years, but we've just won a competition to expand a facility for a brain institute to actually acknowledge my brother, the doctor, says it's the last undiscovered frontier is understanding the brain. And so this brain institute will be at the forefront leading the research. And I think, the pandemic has definitely accelerated the trends that we already had. And I would say we packed a decade into a year and a half, right, of thinking and awareness. So it's such a different time. It also, so, there's mental health, there's sustainability, the kind of issues around the environment, and thinking about which initiatives are not just paying lip service, but actually are fundamentally change the amount of carbon that we release into the atmosphere. So maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we began something called KPMB Labs, or a self-funded small group of people that includes, director, a couple of PhDs. And our initiative at the beginning of it was to think, we jump on a competition, we jump into a scheme, we immediately start, thinking about, how does it work inside out, outside in, what's the massing of the building? And when we haven't really thoughtfully considered the orientation, the wind, the solar, and that's something you get to with outside consultants. We wanted to bring all of that in-house. And so in doing that, we've been able to very thoughtfully weave these initiatives into the project. And there are some of the team leaders who, design team leaders who are very adept at this anyway. And then there are others who need the kind of combination and they reach out to the lab immediately. So it's been, again, our way of addressing that issue. So I think the business leaders, there is a new ethos that is a business. It's being driven. Everything has to be driven. So I think we're at that confluence of drivers that will allow us to address these issues and get architects have so much ability to influence the world, but we have not taken that. We've not had the confluence, perhaps. We've been weakened, I think, in some ways by the by certain aspects of the profession, that are gender, some of them are gender related, some of their sole proprietors, some not thinking of the practice, from really top to bottom. And I think we need to think about practice from bottom up as well as top to bottom, from leadership as well as all the skill set you need to make a practice.
We see so often that it is something as simple as the contractual instrumentation that's used that pushes architects far away from the table of risk. And the architect kind of goes, okay, I'll do my deal and get the heck out of Dodge, right? Kind of deal.
Right.
As opposed to, no, I'm going to create a contract here that keeps me at the table. I am willing to take some of the risk. It's not about being risk averse, it's about being risk aware. And I think that for the last 20, 30 years, the architects have gotten further and further away from understanding that their power is to be at the table, not to be mitigating risk, which pushes them away from the table. And so I'm excited to see that there are new constructs of thinking. And you were using the word confluence. I think the other problem among architects has been a lack of confidence and conviction to lean into things that they needed to have. And perhaps this new wind that's blowing is going to return that to us.
Well, what you say kind of resonates because my partner, Shirley Bloomberg and Bruno Weber, just completed a project out west at University of British Columbia where the budgets were so low, and it was driven by a development team at the university that they actually had to roll up their sleeves with the contractors. And they said, Shirley came back sort of rubbing her hands and saying, we're master builders. We sat down with people, with the people who are going to build this and say, how do we take $100 a square foot? How do we take this? How can we do that? Can we do that? And so, I see this, the IPD, the evolution of the IPD of project delivery. And when we were shortlisted on a project with one of the major American universities to look at that, my first reaction was, I'm not going to let a contractor tell me how to do every aspect of my work. But I think as it evolves, I think if it is a collaboration, if you have that ability to collaborate, to have everybody at the table, we need to break down the silos. I think we have, silos don't enhance a society, they restrict it. So if we can break down silos between our engineers, have completely different, they think a different way, they have a different paradigm, but they have skill sets that are essential, and where we can kind of cross-fertilize. So the engineers, the planners, the consultants, and the contractors to think about how these projects can, we can get the most out of the dollar for the university, because the universities are, they're struggling. It's really important. I think one of the things has been the competitiveness for fee has really been it's made us restrict what our services are rather than enhance them. And yet, I know that the dollars that you spend on fees can save you hundreds of dollars in the project, can save you millions of dollars over the life of the project. And so I think the competitiveness that we experience is just, kills me, because it is a restriction, and it's an isolating factor when we should be expanding our perceptions and sharing together. And, so Indigenous ways of thinking, that is, we sort of think about humanity at the center. They think of landscape at the center. They think of, ways of knowing, ways of making that actually, make a different kind of society. It's a more patient society. It's one we stop listening to each other. We need to listen to each other. We need to, put your hand up and wait for your turn, which has not been the way we've practiced for 35 years. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's so, I think the opportunities that we have through this crisis are unparalleled. And I think this will, I'm excited. I mean, you see behind me the offices that we haven't occupied since March, 2020, I guess, right?
So going back to one of the things you said earlier about this, I call it the race to the bottom on fees, and the short-sightedness that a little bit more will save you gobs more down the road. I think honestly, there is a disconnect between what the architect knows that to be and translating that into the language of business, where the building owner investor who is just trying to get the best deal possible can operate on a short-sightedness, and yet we're not closing that gap of understanding. We're not showing them the mathematics, the finance and economic models that prove that by 2% more here, you'll gain 300% over this 30, 40-year life cycle of the building. And I think it's incumbent on architects to step into that breach and to become more educators, not lecturers, but educators of the owner investor community, to help close that gap for the good of all, right? At the end of the
Yes.
day, I think we whine and moan, they're just driving us to the bottom and we have to do that, instead of saying, hold a second, I'm going to own the responsibility for not properly communicating the value of what I'm bringing you, because the value is not at the moment of spend. The value is in the life cycle of the spend. And so I just, you triggered something for me when I'm thinking about that. And perhaps we are learning a new confidence and a new lingua franca that we need to begin to evolve into during this period. I love your ideas and your thoughts about, the Indigenous way of thinking. Isn't this true? I was just speaking to a firm recently that was showing me all of their new marketing communications, and I was having these effects because everything was human-centric, human experience, human. Everything was human. And they could see that I wasn't like, woohoo about it. And I said to them, isn't it this focus on humanity that's gotten us into the sorry state that we're in? There was just the shock factor, right? Why are we so exalting ourselves to the demise of our world when we're just aliens? We're just visiting here for a while. It literally flipped the entire conversation to a different context, very much like what you're talking about.
Bruce Mao talks about this. We sit on an international advisory committee at McEwen School of Architecture at Laurentian University up in Sudbury. So, some 200 miles north of Toronto, to be close to where the Indigenous reservations are, the Indigenous community. And I think he was born in Sudbury. He came back to Sudbury through this committee, as well as I'm not sure how much he had visited beforehand, but he's really kind of come to the acknowledgement that that the earth is at the center. And that's what the Indigenous people are telling us, is if we think about if we think carefully, that is what we are. We are here to be protectors of the earth, and look what we have done. By, as you say, making humanity at the center has not gone well, shall we say. We need to go back and think more carefully about everything that we do. In the first year at McEwen, their first year architectural project is to build a canoe, a birch bark canoe with, I would say, an elder, but they're now called knowledge keepers. They, do everything from knowing when you can take the skin off a birch bark tree and how to construct it. So it takes 6 months. It takes a long time. And in that long time conversation, it's sort of like our in-office conversation. It takes a year. It takes 6 months, to actually build this. And I think those students come out with a very different understanding, appreciation, and they will drive change. Because we need to have constant reminders. My kids are constant reminders of the kind of language that we use, that we need to evolve. My daughter just said, I was talking about young people, and she said, "Mom, it's ageist." I said, "Well, I thought ageist went the other way." She said, "No, you're as big a problem as somebody who speaks about old people or excludes or so that the idea of knowledge keepers that we learn from." And the integration of generations, because that's what we're facing. That's what we're not facing. That's the great opportunity that we have is from, young to knowledge keepers, and
right.
how we might share the land, share the ideas, and not be so competitive. Be happy for the successes of others, and learn from them. It's a whole different way of thinking. And it takes time.
We've adopted the language about seniors or older people. We call it later living.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
It's the later cycle of our life, and yet it's full of life at the end of the day.
But if you take away, we did one of my first big projects was a very large facility in that for long-term care. And one of the exercises they gave you, which was client stimulated, was to go in there, put on swimming goggles, a bathing cap, and gloves on your fingers, and then try to go, and they turn the heat up to about 85 degrees, and see how you made change out of your change purse, how you could see, through the swimming goggles, and it was like, oh my gosh, it was a terrifying experience versus having stimulation, sort of the need for stimulation. So I said, let's put a daycare in this facility, because even people whose memories are crummy, they will go down, they will enjoy the children, and they'll remember until dinner time to share those experiences of what a little girl, little boy did or said, or how they behaved. Like stimulation right through your life is such a critical component. We take that out of our society. I think we have really missed the boat in so many aspects of this.
Yeah. We have an exciting, optimistic future that we're pivoting toward, and certainly at your firm, you are embodying that by this new brave and exciting thing of bringing on 7 new partners to join you, and you folks taking on the role of being those knowledge imparters and being there to support and grow and mature the organization. How exciting is that? At the end of the day, it's somewhat of a microcosm of what we're seeing in many societies that are taking this seriously. And what a powerful conversation we've had, Marianne. Yeah.
Now take it into the projects.
Yeah.
Now take it into the architecture. Be architects.
Yeah.
And the breadth of that opportunity, and as you say, confidence, passion, determination. Don't falter. Don't lose the thread, because if you do, it just all goes down goes out in the wash, and so driven by budget, driven by all the constraints. They are our friends. Those constraints have to be our friends, even through, all aspects of them. So that's our kind of, finally, that's our objective, and that's what we bring. Those opportunities, are coming back to each practice in that way, through that.
Fantastic. Thank you for taking the time to be with me today.
Thank you.
It's just
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
It's been a rich time.